Hi everyone and welcome to today's EAUC webinar. The title of this webinar is Understanding Sustainability Jobs and it will last about an hour. This is the first in a series of 3 webinars about careers and sustainability. My name is Gillian Gibson and I'm the Scotland Programme Coordinator here at the EAUC. If you have any specific event, webinar or training requests, please do get in touch with us at any time. Just a little bit of housekeeping to go over just now. I'm hoping that everyone can hear me well. As viewers, you'll be muted throughout the webinar with only our panelists being able to speak. If you have any technical issues at all throughout this webinar, please let us know by raising your hand by using the button in the top left-hand corner. And the EAUC host, Clara, will message you privately to help. We'll be hearing from each of our panelists, then having a group discussion at the end with some questions. If you have any questions for the panelists during the webinar, you can submit these through the Q&A box, which can also be found top left of your screen. If we have time at the end of the webinar, I'll bring these to the panelists' attention. If we don't, I'll make sure that these are answered offline and emailed to you. So this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded as a resource on the EAUC Sustainability Exchange with all the presentations later on today. Feel free to share these resources with any of your colleagues or fellow EAUC members. Once the webinar is finished, you'll be sent a short survey for us to gain your feedback. Please take a few minutes to complete this survey as the results will help us improve our future events and webinars. So just to get started, and welcome to our first careers webinar out of 3. The careers project that we've been working on focuses on jobs in the sustainability sector, as well as careers in the wider job market that involve sustainability. We've produced guides, which will be downloadable resource made available at the end of the careers webinar series. These will be available at the end of March. We'll let you know by email when these have been uploaded. These guides will look at understanding, preparing, finding and then winning a sustainability job. The webinar today will look to help you understand what a sustainability job can involve. So when we're talking about a sustainability job, we'll refer to a job which overlaps environmental, social and economic boundaries and has either a strong environmental or social justice dimension often. However, you don't need to be working in a purely environmental focused job for it to be deemed part of the sustainability sector. And that's what we're here to give you an insight into today, looking at a variety of jobs that are encompassed under the sustainability umbrella by hearing from our speakers who have come from a range of professions. Jobs and sustainabilities can have sustainability as the core focus, a main responsibility of the job, or just a small aspect of the role. So we'll be hearing from Michelle Brown, who is Head of Social Responsibility and Sustainability Programmes at the University of Edinburgh. We'll be hearing from David Beards, the Senior Policy Officer at the Scottish Funding Council. We'll also be hearing from Russell Payne, Principal Consultant for Business and Sustainability at AECOM, and David Fairhurst, Energy and Utilities Manager at Edinburgh Napier University. So just now we're going to have an introduction from each of our speakers about their jobs and career paths to date, and then we'll be going into the group discussion later on. So Michelle, you're up first, if you're ready to go.
Thanks, Gillian. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Brown. I've been asked to say a bit about me, my role and career path to this point, and then also more than happy to answer questions later when we have the opportunity. My job at the University of Edinburgh is Head of Social Responsibility and Sustainability Programmes. Basically, I'm responsible for helping to organise, plan, manage and deliver programmes which catalyse action and collaboration across the university, and ultimately to help the university achieve the goals and targets that it sets in this area. I report to a Director of Social Responsibility and Sustainability, and I manage an amazing team which includes our Communications Manager, an Engagement Manager, a Programme Manager and a Research and Policy Manager. Our department is part of the Corporate Services Group part of the university. We work closely with other departments like Estates, Procurement, Finance, HR, as well as other colleges and schools. In terms of my own career path, I'm not sure if I have a sort of a normal trajectory in terms of career sustainability, but as Gillian said, we come from all walks of life. I started out my career in international development, but my work has moved between non-profit, business, and higher education. I guess if I take a starting point in the late 1990s, I went to work in Vietnam. This was first with the Red Cross, and really at on the cliff edge of sustainability. Vietnam is incredibly prone to natural disasters, and this is further intensified with climate change. Soon after I started there, a typhoon named Typhoon Linda hit the country and just devastated lives and livelihoods. It killed over 3,000 people. The Red Cross was working on disaster preparedness and relief. And really, I think if I look back, that was my entry into sustainability and realizing the interconnectedness of environment, poverty, and development. After some years working in Vietnam, I also began to get interested in corporate social responsibility at a time when it was not really defined well. I was a director of an NGO resource center, and at that time in the late 90s, companies were coming under the spotlight for their sourcing practices in the country and potential complicity in human rights abuses. Companies were dealing with issues that they did not have to previously deal with, and were looking to partner with development organizations to try to help tackle these really complex issues. And I was really interested in working in that space in between and how we could engage the private sector to try to make a step change in terms of sustainability issues. I went back to Canada to work for some years, both with companies and with voluntary sector organizations. My work then took me back to Asia. I was a program manager and then a country director for an organization called VSO, Voluntary Service Overseas. And my work took me to far-flung corners of China as well. I took a small break to have our second son and also did some consulting work. My husband's work then took us to Hong Kong, and I met up with a man by the name of Richard Welford at that time. He was chairman of CSR Asia and was also the director of the Corporate Environmental Governance Program at the University of Hong Kong. So I went to work there and also was working on a PhD at the University of Hong Kong. My career then took me back, took me to the UK. We moved to Scotland in 2010, but I continued to be connected to CSR Asia and opened up an office in Scotland, which led me to do incredibly interesting work with the International Finance Corporation, with a range of companies looking on really difficult sustainability issues, with the United Nations Global Compact, with the International Labour Organization, and other types of organization. But to do this meant traveling a lot and being away from my own kids and husband, so it was personally unsustainable. So when I saw that the University of Edinburgh was setting up this department, I threw my name in. It was great to see a university looking really seriously at integration of SRS across the whole organization. And sustainability is really part of my job here at the University of Edinburgh. The purpose of our department is to provide high quality advice, support and action on social responsibility and sustainability. We exist to help the university to work on these issues. We deliver and facilitate programs across a range of issues. The university takes a broad definition of social responsibility. Our own department has priorities relating to climate and energy, resource efficiency, identifying and addressing issues within our own supply chains, supporting the work of responsible investment, looking at staff learning and development, and into the future community engagement as well too. So I feel really lucky to work with a great team here at the University of Edinburgh, and happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle. And that was really interesting to hear where you come from. And I knew that you'd been at Hong Kong, but I didn't realize that you'd been in Vietnam as well. And great to hear the sort of range of things that are covered in the SRS team at Edinburgh University, and the fact that you're actually part of the corporate services. Perfect, thank you. So up next is David Beards from the Scottish Funding Council.
Thanks, Gillian. Hello, everyone. I'm not sure my story is going to be quite as exciting as Michelle's, but here we go. My name is David Beards. I'm Senior Policy Officer at the Scottish Funding Council. We fund all of the colleges and universities in Scotland. I'm in the research and innovation team, and my main policy areas are things to do with climate change and carbon reduction, anything to do with ICT, including the national network infrastructure and how ICT is used within colleges and universities for learning and research. And I'm also working on some new areas such as our international strategy. Okay, you might be wondering what's in the role of a policy officer. And I guess it's working with government strategy, which is at quite a broad level, and kind of teasing that out in more detail for the college and university sector. So it's some joint work advising the government as it develops strategy, a lot of working with stakeholders. We are a funding body, so often the strategy comes with funding. We are managing funding programs. So I'll be funding projects, looking at bids, monitoring projects, sitting on steering groups, that kind of thing. But sometimes it's policy work and there's no particular funding attached. It's about guidance, it's about working with stakeholders and taking positions and developing positions on things. So I suppose the day-to-day is lots of meetings, talking to people, understanding where people are coming from and where we can go together. And dealing with correspondence, whether that's inquiries or advising government or providing information on funding and other things. How did I get to this point? Well, my first job was actually archaeology. I'm really interested in history. So I did archaeology for a little while, really interested in music as well, and I'm still very involved in music. But neither of these things were very lucrative. So I ended up getting a job in the civil service in Scotland. This is back in the late 80s. I had a few posts in the civil service, ranging from agriculture, fisheries, Scottish Prison Service, advice to ministers on press and public relations, those kinds of things. And then I joined the Scottish Funding Council in the early 90s. So I've been at SFC for over 20 years now. So how does sustainability relate to my job? Well, for most of the time working at SFC, I've actually worked on the learning and teaching side. So for most of the last 20 years or so, I've been working on the quality of learning and teaching, student engagement, development of the curriculum and pedagogy, those kinds of things. But currently my job, it's really around how the research and innovation effort in Scotland relates to things like the carbon footprint of the sector. So I manage our capital funding programs for colleges and universities with a view to low carbon investments. On the innovation side, we're looking at a number of things around the circular economy. We've got a very interesting project on the Scottish Institute for Remanufacturing, and related things like Scotland's energy policy and the kind of research which might help Scotland transition to a low carbon economy. We've also got a relationship with EAUC, of course, and funding to them and managing that relationship and working with them and doing things like this today. And then internally we have a green impact group which I chair, and that basically coordinates all the kind of office activities like recycling, and we do our report every year to the Scottish Government on our carbon footprint and kind of internal campaigns. So that's my story. That's how I got to where I am today. Is that enough, Gillian?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, David. And a good insight into what a policy officer, what that job involves, just because it's quite often, it's one that comes up quite a lot in sustainability, but just seeing it from the SFC side there, and the variety of stuff that you do there. It's a lot goes on in a day of David Beards. Okay, so we have, thanks for that, David. And now we have Russell Payne from ACOM.
Hello, everyone. As Gillian has just said, my name's Russell Payne. I'm currently a principal consultant in ACOM's business sustainability team. What do I do on a day-to-day basis? I coordinate and provide technical input into a range of environmental and sustainability projects for public and private sector clients, predominantly in Scotland, but also UK and internationally. Our practice, as we like to call it, is split into 4 key areas. The first being sustainable infrastructure. So we assist clients with providing infrastructure that is resilient and adaptable to climate change. But we also provide general sustainability advice on a range of areas on major infrastructure projects. Secondly, we have a sub-practice area in environmental management and sustainable resource management. So we provide environmental management system advice. We also do quite a bit of work in the circular economy, and also providing advice on low carbon, the transition to low carbon economy. We also have a carbon and energy management practice that focuses on providing, undertaking carbon footprinting work and the broad range of energy management work. And the final one is risk and performance. So we do quite a lot of work with global clients with their supply chains regarding social justice and protecting their reputation from any kind of risks that may be involved in their supply chain. And we also help a number of clients with their annual sustainability reports. In terms of my career, well, it spans 13 years so far, and of which I've been with AECOM for about 8.5. It all started out with my mum saying to me between my 3rd and 4th year at university, "You're not going to work at Sainsbury's again. You have to go out and get something that's going to start your career." And thankfully, for my sake, that kind of happened. I took on an environmental placement at Aberdeen Airport through Shell, and I did a waste education programme. So doing waste audits and then doing some waste engagement work with passengers, Aberdeen Airport staff, and airport and airline staff as well. So it's 8 weeks. It was really, really interesting, and it threw me right in at the deep end for actually working out in the real world. And thankfully I survived. I then did some more work at Aberdeen Airport in my final year of university, and in the following summer I was doing general environmental management work, pollution prevention and resource efficiency work. I then went to work for a waste company in Aberdeen, helping them to grow their recycling business by going out and doing audits of clients to identify what waste streams could be recycled. I then moved on to Edinburgh Airport, where I did some environmental management work in terms of, again, pollution prevention and compliance work, but also reporting of environmental data and doing some resource efficiency projects. I then moved into sort of more specific energy work when I worked at an environmental charity called Changeworks in Edinburgh, which in my team we covered community renewables, business advice, and householder renewables and energy efficiency. And then I came to AECOM, and I've been with them ever since. Two key secondments from AECOM that I've done. One was a waste and sustainability advisor with the Ministry of Defence, helping the Army in Scotland, North of England and Northern Ireland to implement environmental management systems and practices, but also at BP, at the Grangemouth refinery, doing environmental compliance work. And so finally, I thought I'd just give you a flavour of some of the projects that I'm currently working on. Just finished a briefing paper, the Institute of Environment Management and Assessment, looking at driving sustainable resource management through the revised ISO standard with a heavy focus on circular economy. I'm doing some carbon footprinting work of a road scheme, doing some sustainability advice for the new Aberdeen to Inverness railway upgrade line, and doing some energy legislation review work for a global client in Europe. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of what I do and what I've done.
Perfect. Thanks, Russell. And nothing wrong with Sainsbury's, but it sounds like your mum had the right idea to get you out there and working. Actually, can I ask, what was the charity, Russell, that you worked for in Edinburgh? I think that the speakers went out a wee bit.
It was Changeworks, formerly Lothian Environmental Edinburgh Partnership.
Perfect, thank you. No, great to hear the background there of where you've come from, quite diverse as well. And really good to hear about the work that's sort of around global supply chains and social justice and so on, and obviously the hot topic of circular economy. So thank you. And now we're on to David Fairhurst from Edinburgh Napier University.
Okay, thank you, Gillian. Hello, everybody. Yes, my name's David Fairhurst. As Gillian said, I currently work at Edinburgh Napier University. I'm the Energy and Utilities Manager here at the university. I'm based within the Department of Property and Facilities, and I work closely with the only other person at the university who's really got a full remit for sustainability, and that's the Environmental and Sustainability Manager, Jamie Pearson. So we work very closely together, trying to drive forward the environmental performance of the university. Obviously, my particular area is looking at energy and utilities. So I'm responsible for all the management that goes along with our gas and our electricity and our water. As you can imagine, reasonably decent size of a university, about 16,000 staff, has a considerable amount of spend on those three things. So I'm responsible for continually trying to manage in the best way our energy use, while obviously meeting the needs of the people who use the buildings, whether they're using labs or whether they're just here sitting in lecture theatres or whether they're sitting in offices. So we're constantly trying to balance their needs, their comfort needs, with also driving down our energy use and our related carbon. So I'm responsible for monitoring trends, putting in place meters and all sorts of different things to try and identify where our energy is going. Is there any wasted energy that we can drive out and that nobody will notice? So all sorts of things really going on there. I'm also responsible for any kind of strategy development in this area. So over the next year or so, we're looking to put in place a new carbon management plan. The previous carbon management plan has actually expired recently, but as part of that, we achieved about a 40% reduction in our carbon emissions. So the university as a whole is doing very well. I spend quite a lot of time working on projects, trying to make best use of some fantastic new technologies that are coming through that really reduce energy use, things like LED lighting, different types of pumps, different approaches to heating buildings. We've got some studies ongoing to see whether we can increase the amount of renewables that we use, whether we should use solar panels, and all sorts of things like that at the university. I'm also responsible for any legal compliance issues to do with energy, and things like the carbon reduction commitment, production of energy performance certificates, and all the reporting that the public sector and the university sector is responsible for at the moment. So how did I get here? Well, I've been working in this sector ever since I left university. I was always keen to stay within this sector and work in environment and sustainability. I did degrees in environmental management at Stirling University and then an MSc in environmental policy at Lancaster. I then went on and did some temping work for Preston Borough Council, as it was at that time, and did a little voluntary project to try and develop a travel plan for the university to try and encourage people not to drive so much. That actually led on to 2 subsequent full-time jobs in that area, and I ended up at Edinburgh City Council as an environmental policy officer with a specialism in sustainable travel. I worked there for 5 or so years, looking at travel in the city, looking at air quality, and then gradually branched into looking at sustainability in buildings. At that time, the Scottish Parliament was just opening and moving down to its home now at Holyrood, and they were looking for an environmental performance manager. So I was very fortunate in managing to get that position. I was at the Parliament for 10 years and did everything for the Parliament under the umbrella of sustainability and environmental performance. So I looked at energy, biodiversity, worked with procurement teams, did all the reporting, did all the waste management, did a lot of engagement with staff and MSPs, etc. So it really did quite a lot, and a very broad and very interesting job at the Scottish Parliament. Then after being there for 10 years, I decided it was time for a change, and now, as I say, I'm currently here at Edinburgh Napier, trying to help them reduce their energy use and improve their carbon performance. So that's me, Gillian.
Lovely. Thanks so much, David. I guess, yeah, energy and utilities might not obviously scream sustainability from the very start there, but it's just great to hear the work that you do, that obviously that juggle between the energy usage, trying to reduce the carbon, but then also dealing with the fact that you have students, you have staff there on campus so much. So yeah, I hope, thank you for all our speakers for doing your introductions there and giving us a bit of a flavour as to the background, a bit to do with the education and the sort of journey that you can go through to have a sustainability job, and the fact that actually your job might not say sustainability in it just now, but that's definitely a key part. So yeah, we're going to pop into a group discussion now. We've got some questions already set up, and I've spotted that there's a few questions coming in from viewers as well. So if you are listening in, please feel free to pop any of your questions into the Q&A, and we will answer those either at the end, or we'll either get them, we'll answer them afterwards if we don't get through them all. So yeah, I've popped everyone's videos on. Unfortunately, David Beards couldn't join us with a video there. Hi. But yeah, we'll just have a bit of a group discussion now, just around some of the questions. So feel free to pitch in, panelists, whenever you feel you've got something to input there. So first of all, why do you work in the area of sustainability? Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to start with that. Ever since I was quite young, I've always had a passion for the environment. I've always been very kind of concerned when I've seen unnecessary environmental impacts. I grew up spending a lot of time outdoors, had a real love of nature and wildlife, and it just followed through quite naturally for me. I did a degree in environmental science, and I was very fortunate just to kind of follow through my career, and I've always worked in this area.
Nice. That's quite often one that people say, is that they were out in the environment, or they were quite outdoorsy when they were young, and that sort of sparked something for them early on. Russell or David, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I have very similar feelings to what David just described in terms of the kind of personal outlook on the environment and sustainability as well. I think one of the things I've always enjoyed is going to work for organisations who you wouldn't traditionally think would want to be sustainable. So for example, really enjoyed the role at the Ministry of Defence, because that was a real challenge, getting people to think really differently about the environment, but also relating it to their role and how they could do it responsibly while they can still operate and do what they need to do. It was also the same at BP, so I've always really relished that angle.
Hi, a couple of things from me. Before I got a job, one of the bands I was in, we were very political, and our first LP actually had sort of late 80s, had an insert on working weekends on organic farms and acid rain and the issues of the day. So I've always been very interested from that point of view. But as you said, Gillian, I mean, when I started work, the job sustainability officer didn't exist. So there wasn't a job to apply for, really. And I guess my story is that opportunities came to me. Someone said, "Can you deal with this?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds interesting," you know, and a chance to do something positive. And I do feel the people you tend to meet in this kind of work are very positive, interesting people, and the work itself I just find very rewarding. But the portfolio of things I have to deal with just now has just accumulated over time because people said, can you handle this? Do you want to take this on? And I said, yeah, of course. And before you know it, you've ended up with a big pile of interesting things to do, and no regrets.
I think I'd echo the comments that have already been made, Gillian. I think, but for me, it was, you know, coming into it at a time when there maybe wasn't a job title around sustainability or around social responsibility, but knew that I wanted to work on those areas. And, you know, my mum saying, maybe social work, and thinking that was me looking, you know, I sort of came into it always with a deep connection to environmental issues, but really interested in the social issues and in human rights issues. You know, wherever you're from or wherever you may be, a right to clean air, a right to clean water, a right to be free from poverty or education. And I also really connected with Russell's comment about working with organizations, you know, to challenge organizations and connect to issues or get organizations to make decisions that they might not normally be. And I think that's a really good challenge in sustainability. And for anyone out there to be thinking about a job in sustainability, also not always needing to look for jobs with that in the title, but in any sort of role, you can find ways to connect to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely something that makes it a bit different, is the fact that you have environmental, economic and social. And that's such a key thing, is that you aren't always just looking for that environmental job. We definitely have, I know that whenever I say what I'm doing, my friends are like, you know, trees or something. It's like, no, you need to explain this better, is that, yeah, sustainability isn't just the environmental side of things.
I think Gillian, just related to that, and something that Michelle just made me think of there, one real key skill that I've had to develop, and I think is fundamental, is tailoring your message to who you're speaking to.
Yeah.
Be it, you know, a student, or be it what I would call, you know, an operative in a factory, be it, you know, somebody who does a very technical, specific role within a local authority, all the way up to senior management team, company board, chief executive. It's really, really important that I personally think that sustainability professionals recognize their role and tap into what's going to make them tick, for want of a better expression. And I think I've learned the hard way. But if you can develop that skill and recognize that, then you it's a really good platform to go in a sustainability career.
Yeah, I guess following on from that, I guess we're on a webinar about careers in sustainability, but would you all identify yourself as working in the sustainability sector, or that being your job? You would. David Beards as well? Since we can't see him nodding.
Possibly. I mean, I feel more like, you know, I'm a government official and that's kind of my sector, if you like, but otherwise the education sector is the one I work with. And my job changes, you know, I mean, who knows, in a few years' time I might be working on completely different policy areas. I suspect not. I think they quite like me working on these issues and I'm quite happy to stay here, but it is in the nature of my work, certainly, that a new strategy will come along and they'll say, could you work on this now? But I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing, to be honest.
Yeah, so I guess as well, like you were saying earlier, the term sustainability wasn't around at the start of your career, David, and trying to, at what point did everyone identify of, oh, I'm in this sector? Or, yeah, how did you get into that position?
I guess for me, as I said, my previous job at the Funding Council was around learning and teaching, and there's been various efforts to bring sustainability into the curriculum. And an early effort was around teacher education in the late 90s. And that was a proposition that came to me and I was asked to advise on. And a few years after that, we had the UN Decade of Education for Sustainable Development, which, you know, the Funding Council was asked to work with universities and colleges on what our contribution would be to all of that. So that was 10 years of me thinking about the curriculum and students and teachers and all of those things. I think since then, anytime anything to do with climate change or anything like that, people said, "Oh, that's David." And so, you know, people ask me about their double glazing and stuff like this, which is a bit ridiculous. But you know, you just become identified as that person. But that's where it started, with the curriculum and the student experience, just as an aspect of, is that quality, is that relevant in terms of student education these days? So that's kind of where I came in.
And anyone else? Do you know at what point?
Me, I did my master's in development studies, and that was about the time of the sort of Bruntland Commission and the definition of interrogating sort of sustainable development. So yeah, I was interested in working in development, and obviously within the context of sustainable development. And probably then in the sort of early 2000s, you know, starting to work with business, and you know, companies also need to be more transparent on their sustainability impacts. And then you saw businesses grow and have sort of sustainability managers, you know, and working with that network of people. But yeah, it wasn't necessarily always a, you know, a job role or a job description, but was always connected through jobs.
Russell, David, do you know when you first feel like you stepped into the sustainability world?
To be honest, I think I've always felt like I've worked in the sustainability or the environmental field. So early on in my career, I worked for local authorities, and the position of LA21 officer was quite well established, so I was working with those people. The term sustainability perhaps wasn't used very much, but certainly roles like environmental policy officer, LA21 officer, they were around. Certainly the scope of the work has changed now. People didn't talk too much about social responsibility back in the late 90s. The link with the financial element of sustainability as well was perhaps a lot weaker than it is now. But yeah, so I've been quite fortunate. I suppose I've always felt I've worked in the environmental field, and while I've bobbed around a bit from environmental policy officer, doing sustainable travel, now to energy and carbon management, it all kind of fits, I think, within the field, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I first heard, if I remember correctly, about sustainable development in my undergraduate geography degree, 1999, 2000. But then actually, when I started my career, I did a lot more what we call traditional environmental compliance work, environmental management work, recycling, etc. And clearly, you know, the field has thankfully moved on from that point of view. I did want to gain a broad background, so that I then went and did a master's in energy, and that has helped to kind of diversify. And for those on the call who are potentially interested in a job in consultancy, there are two perspectives, if you like. One is you may have a very specific technical aspect you want to go into. For example, you might want to go into environmental impact assessment and a sub-discipline within that, and that's all you do. Or you can take the route that I've taken, which is you can have a broad background and can cover a lot of topics, both of which are equally attractive to a consultancy. So if you are considering a career in consultancy, I would encourage you to look at any consultancy who can offer any sort of placement, where you can go and get actual work experience working on projects. You know, that will stand you in good stead whether you want to stay in consultancy or not. So I would encourage you to look at any consultancy who would offer such placements.
I think that's a good tip, is that because there is such a wide range of what you can be doing, it's like getting that experience and getting practice is such a, or just getting a taster in different sectors and so on. That makes such a difference to work out which sort of channel you'd like to go down, or do what all of us have done here and meander your way into the sector. Okay, so third question was, I'm taking it down a wee bit, but are there any negative aspects to working in the sustainability sector? So may as well put it out there for everyone. It can't be all roses all the time. Or is it? And everyone loves it.
It can be It can be challenging, that's for sure. I mean, because not everybody gets it. Not everybody understands that the real need to use our resources better, to protect our biodiversity, to reduce our carbon emissions. People understand quite often the need to manage money well, but around about managing carbon well, you know, that's still a concept that not everybody either fully understands or fully buys into, and it's often very much part of the role, as I think others have already said, that we're out there to kind of educate, influence, cajole people into thinking differently and doing different things. So yeah, from my perspective as energy manager, one of the big banes of my life is people calling up and saying, I'm cold. You know? And it would be so easy just to go, oh, well, forget about the carbon, forget about the cost, I'll just turn everything up. And it's that balance. But that's kind of a day-to-day niggle of a very kind of practical job that I'm involved in. But it does actually exemplify, I think, the problem and the challenge that I'm sure that we will all face, that a lot of people will sign up to, yeah, let's reduce our carbon emissions, I'm concerned about global warming, I'm concerned about biodiversity, but then when you get down to the, well, could you do this differently? That's where the challenge is, and that can be, it can be hard going at times to keep on at that on a day-to-day basis when you're quite often having to challenge people. So I think if you're going to go into this career, you perhaps need to be going into it with your eyes open, that it's going to be challenging and that there's going to have to be people that you're going to have to try and influence. I mean, to me, I think one of the key skills is being flexible, knowing how to influence people as well is an absolute key skill that you need almost above any other skill really in this field. Is how do you engage with people at all levels, whether you're speaking to cleaners or whether you're speaking to your chief exec or your director of finance. How do you go about influencing them to hopefully see something a bit more along your point of view?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we come up against, or I come against even in my personal life quite a lot. And I think that translates into like your work, because you then have a space and it's your job role to convince people and influence people in that sort of way. So yeah, you sort of given that job role and given that title to tackle those issues.
I think it's really important to, again, it picks up on the people skills, to understand other people's points of view and maybe the pressures that other people within the organization are under as well. And it's not necessarily a negative, but it always gets me thinking about, the question around potential trade-offs on sustainability or the balancing act. And there was a woman I met many, many years ago in Laos who summed it up and went to visit a gold mine. And obviously it was wreaking havoc on the local environment. But she was sort of telling the story about how, her son now went to school, her other son had a job, and it had brought this thing. But she's like, yes, now I can't catch fish so easily in the river. And that was from a very micro level about the kind of environmental and poverty and economic trade-offs to obviously with, translating those into a sort of organizational context. How do you make the business case to, someone within the finance team who's thinking about just the sort of financial costs and benefits, but maybe over the long term impacts, and maybe those trade-offs, looking at the short term versus long term for certain companies. They have to show the differences within say 3 months. Lucky now to work in an organization which does have a long term obviously view, and that helps to understand those risks and opportunities differently. But yeah, I don't know if it's negative. I think it depends on the type of organization as well.
Yeah. I would.
Sorry, go on, Russell.
Oh, thanks, David. Sure. I would agree with what David and Michelle said so far. Absolutely. I think one of my biggest challenges that I've faced is that you're often pigeonholed as somebody who wants to be extreme. You'll just want us just to shut the whole factory down, and you want us just to shut the whole operation down because we're polluting the world and it's all very bad. And I think that's the biggest challenge. I think that without meaning to sound in any which way stereotypical, people perceive those working in sustainability as a particular stereotype. So if you can break yourself out of that and recognise where they're coming from and show that you can present a balanced view, recognising that you are there in part to protect the environment, but you're also there to reduce carbon, reduce cost, educate, support people. Then you can, more often than not, bring those people around and change their view of you. Once you do that, you have their respect and you're off and running. But I've worked for a number of organisations and within a number of organisations where that's happened, and you have to be kind of broad-shouldered about it and take it on, and then, you know, try and bring them round. As David alluded to earlier, you do have to cajole people. But you do also have to recognise that, unfortunately, even today, some people do perceive us in this industry as being extreme or wanting to take an extreme view. And that's very much often not the case.
I think that's when it can actually sometimes be easier if you don't have sustainability in your job title, because it sort of gives you that free pass in there to chat about it without people without people having that perception of you beforehand. David Beards, were you going to pitch in before?
Maybe just to comment on Russell's point about being pigeonholed. I mean, I find it difficult to say no to things. And so you often end up with a very wide breadth of things. So you might one day be engaging with principals of universities about £1 million grants, and it's all very important. And the very next day you might be raking in the bins because people haven't recycled properly, and you need to have a word with someone about that. It'd be nice to think one day you could escape that level of stuff, but sometimes you can't because you're the green person and that's kind of how everyone sees you. So I guess there's always that tension that you want to broaden it out. You want everyone to be engaged, but at the end of the day, if it's only you, you know, sometimes you still got to do the whole breadth of stuff. So you might find, compared to some jobs, it's perhaps not so well paid at the top end when you're engaging with the most senior people on some of, I think, the most challenging issues facing our civilization. And you might find, compared to other people, you're not maybe getting the salary you think you deserve for that kind of work. For me, the reward is in the significance of the issues and the impact that you can have in that kind of work.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that on a personal level. Of that, I like coming into work and knowing that it's helping an overall, an overall cause, I guess. But really interesting to hear those aspects anyway, and just so that everyone gets a wee bit of an insight into it, and understands a bit better that as many positives as there are to the sort of sustainability sector in this type of work, there are some negatives there as well. But I think what we got there, or one of the key things, was the fact that just make sure that you know who you're talking to and what their angle is and how you can engage with them, because that will always be difficult, and the fact that your role can be diverse. And then final question would be, what advice would you give college and university students interested in working in the sustainability sector? So a key item from each of you.
I think it goes back to don't just look for it in the job title. I think, take a wide breadth of looking at it. It's a hard job market out there and difficult to find jobs, but at the same time, I think any organization, no matter its size or where it is, has to manage sustainability issues. So it's going to continue to be a growing area as well, but to think as entry points, maybe don't always need to find the thing with sustainability in the title, but do something that connects you with the issues and enables you to look at different opportunities, to take a risk and take a chance.
Lovely. Anyone else want to pitch in?
I think from my experience, I mean, on paper, it might have looked like I got my initial jobs because I had an undergraduate degree and a master's. But actually, I think back to when I did a piece of voluntary work to help write the LA21 officers, as they were called, or the environmental policy officers, help them to write a sustainable travel plan for the council. And it was that piece of volunteering, almost that piece of flexibility, that I think actually got me going, really. And then obviously having the degrees and the qualification really helped to to back that up and give me the understanding of the broader issues and why I was doing what I was doing. But I think I think Michelle has made a very good point that get into an organisation that you think is interesting if you can, and then look for the opportunities to do the environmental or the sustainability work, as will inevitably needed to be done by any organisation. So yeah, I think that is potentially a good route to get into sustainability if you can't get a job that says sustainability on the tin.
I would completely echo what David and Michelle have just said. I think when I look back and I look at my placement, which I did, my industrial placement that I had no knowledge and had no interest in waste management whatsoever. But A, I had my mum barking at me, and B, I had, I knew it might open up into environmental management, and that's exactly what happened. So the point that David just made about, be it work experience or be it voluntary, if you can show that you've got some experience that you can relate to in that area, then it'll definitely stand you in good stead. And as I've just said about, for those that are interested in consultancy, a placement, an internship are great ways and are highly respected when you come to an interview or an assessment process. In terms of, even if it's not in the actual area that you want to do it in, but showing that you've got, real world experience is, I think, is invaluable.
Yeah, we talk about this quite a lot in the guides as well, as the idea of transferable skills as well, just getting any sort of experience, and showing that even voluntary work, weekend work, anything like that, you'll gain skills from it that you'll be able to transfer into any job. David, did you have any advice?
I think most of the points have been covered already, but I'd come back to something that Russell said earlier on, which is about understanding things from other people's point of view. That's an essential skill in any area of policy, and I think particularly so in sustainability, where we're trying to do something holistic here, where you're tending to the social, the environmental, and the financial. So you might be the Green Crusader, but if the person you're speaking to is interested in money, that's the perspective you're going to have to deal with. So yes, as you said, Gillian, the transferable skills of communication, persuasion, and ability to collaborate, I think those are the main things.
Perfect. Okay, well, that's us rounded up the questions that we'd already pre-prepared or had a look at. I'm just having a wee look over the Q&A section from people, just because we've got 5 minutes or so towards the end here. I think an interesting one at the very end here, we have, what advice would you give to a student or recent graduate with a business background, not technical, aiming to work within sustainability? So I guess does anyone have any advice that's got that sort of business side to it rather than an environmental side, I guess?
I hope that I've tried to get the message across in the last hour or so that, if you've got those business skills and you understand how a business works, that's a really good platform for then layering on top sustainability, or even more importantly, intertwining sustainability so that sustainability becomes part of a business's everyday practice. And I use the term business loosely. I can mean an organization. So that's what I have to do in my job probably almost every single day, almost in every single project. So if you do have those business skills in terms of how it functions, how it's financially operates, how it makes money, then that's a great skill to take to then layer in sustainable aspects.
I think this is actually something that we're going to address in our next webinar as well, is the idea of a lot of companies are now looking to include sustainability and social responsibility and so on into their business, or business as usual. And so it's key now, that you're not just focused on sustainability, but just understanding business overall. And we'll be looking at the sort of skills and so on in the next webinar of what these companies are looking looking for in their graduates to help their companies become more sustainable and so on.
Yeah. Gillian, can I just come in?
Yeah.
Increasingly these days I hear people talking about managing risk. I was at a seminar yesterday on the circular economy, looking at resources, when they're going to run out, how that presents a risk to any business. And I think whatever organization you're in, they will have a risk register, and that's a very powerful tool if you're interested in resources and how they're going to affect the future of the business. And you know, that's something I think you can use that to progress this agenda.
Definitely.
I would completely agree. I think whoever, again, it goes back to the communication skills, and in order to tackle these challenges, we must have business at the table, and business has to act on it. And maybe from a business perspective, it's either going to be an opportunity or a risk. So thinking about the language that works around there, and those, you know, those business skills are fundamental for any sort of organization to address these challenges.
Yeah, it's definitely a growing sector anyway, and widening. I feel like it maybe started off wide and then became more environmental and is sort of widening out again into that, includes sort of social and financial or economic as well. Okay, well, we're nearly at 1 o'clock, so I will round off just now. Two ticks, I'll just share my screen again so that we can have details up about, where is it? Here we go. So our next webinar is coming up on the 20th of March, 12 until 1 again. This time we'll be having, this is all about preparing for a job in sustainability. So we will have NUS coming in to talk about the research that they've done with companies and what skills they're looking for. We'll also have AIMA there, looking at skills and knowledge of graduates and along similar lines. We also have Robert Gordon University, the course lead for corporate and social responsibility, chatting about the increase in that trend. And then also Laura Tailor, who works in HR for PwC, and what they look for in their graduates sustainability wise when they're recruiting. So I'll be sending out this presentation along with the webinar, which will be put up online. All these resources will be available after we finish today, and there'll also be a link in there so that you can book for the next careers webinar. So yeah, I just want to say a massive thank you to all our speakers today for your input, and for everyone that came to listen as well. I hope that's been useful. We have noted all of those questions that were put in the Q&A section. There was quite a lot for Michelle as well about your international links and so on. So we'll make sure those are answered and they're included maybe at the end of the slides and so on for everyone to see. So we'll make sure those are addressed for you as well. But yeah, so just a massive thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a lovely day.